online ministry. My name is Reverend Alicia-Leslie, and I'm so glad you're joining me today as we look at the story of Adam and Eve and the fall of man. The fall of man is what is blamed for all the troubles we have in our lives today. Did you ever wonder how? Well, we're going to take a look at that. Just a quick review of the story, that Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden by God, and they were told they could eat from anything in the garden except for one thing, and that was the tree in the center of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, of blessings and calamities. So one day when Eve was in the garden, the serpent came up to her and said, "So tell me, are you allowed to eat everything in the garden?" And Eve said, "Oh yes, well, all but from one tree. And God said that we should not only not eat of it, or not even touch it, or we will surely die." And the serpent said, "You're not gonna die. I'll tell you why God doesn't want you to eat from that tree. Because first of all, look how beautiful the fruit is." And she looked, and it was beautiful. And then he said, "And if you eat that fruit, your eyes will be open, and you will know the difference between good and evil and blessing and calamity." So Eve thought about it, and she just really kept looking at that fruit, and it really looked good, and she kept thinking, "Well, I would really like to have that." She just felt it would be the best thing. So she ate it. And she brought some fruit to Adam, and she said, "Hey, this fruit's really good. You got to try it." So he ate it. Well, after they'd eaten it, their eyes were open, and they did know the difference between good and evil, and they knew that what they had done was wrong, and they realized that they were naked. So they were ashamed, and they took fig leaves and sewed them together to make little aprons to cover themselves up, because they were so embarrassed and ashamed, and they knew what they'd done was not right. Later in the afternoon, in the cool of the day, God was walking through the garden, but he couldn't find Adam. He said, "Adam, where are you?" And from the bushes came the voice, "I'm over here in the bushes." And he said, "What are you doing in the bushes, Adam?" And Adam said, "Well, we're hiding because we're naked and we're ashamed." And God said, "Who told you you were naked? Did you eat the fruit of that tree that I told you not to eat?" And so they came out from the bushes, and Adam said, "Well, yeah, I ate the fruit, but that woman that you gave me to be with, she gave me the fruit." And she said, "Yeah, I ate the fruit, but that serpent, he tricked me." Well, once you got past Eve, the serpent had nobody to blame. So God was furious, and he started throwing out some curses. And the first curse he threw out was at the serpent. And he said, "You shall crawl on your belly for all your days, and you shall eat the dust of the ground, and that's all you shall eat." And he said to Eve, "Because you disobeyed me, you will bring forth your young in great pain and travail, and you will have a strong desire for your husband, and your husband will rule over you." That's a toughie. And to Adam, he didn't escape either. He said, "Adam, you are going to be banished from here because you listened to your wife. You knew the rule, and you broke it anyway. And so you are going to have to go and try to till dry, barren soil and scratch yourself out something to eat by the sweat of your brow, and you shall suffer long and hard." So, to put it simply, God was not a happy camper. Now, what does this have to do with us? Oh, God must have had a moment of compassion as he banished them, because it said that he clothed them in animal skins, so I guess they wouldn't be cold in the cold, cruel world. Now, to us, first of all, we want to know that this is about the fall of man in unity. We talk about it being the falling away in consciousness of our oneness with God. It is the development of a sense of separation when when Adam and Eve wanted to be as wise as God, to be like God, they were saying that we're separate. When they were in the garden, they never had to want for a thing because they were living in complete harmony with spiritual principle, with the law. I want you to consider the possibility that is true for all of us individually and together also. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, said that when man disobeys universal law, it is the underlying cause of all suffering. Think about that. When man disobeys universal law, it is the underlying cause of all suffering. You see, remember from the first chapter of Genesis that God created and he said it was good. It was very good. So the pain and suffering that we are experiencing are not God's will for us. They are the result of seeing ourselves as separate from, or should we say exempt from, God's laws, from spiritual law, from spiritual principle. You know, when we interpret metaphysically, we look at three levels. We look at literal, moral, and metaphysical. So, literally speaking, is this a true story? Probably not. It is an allegory. It is a story that tells of a truth principle, because this story happens every day in all of our lives. Every time we live contrary to spiritual principle, we lose our garden, our paradise experience, even briefly. So on the literal level, it's just a factual thing. You break the law, you pay the price. Now on the moral level, it's not nice that we work together as one with God, one with each other. We respect law. So that's just on a flat out, everyday moral level. But then when we look down deep, when we look into our heart and soul, to the spiritual level, we see that we are called on to express the divinity that we are. However, we also have our human qualities. We are a spiritual being having a human experience. You know when when God sent Adam and Eve, when he banished them and he put animal skins on them? Think for a moment, what if this is our animal skin? That the living soul that we are is clothed in animal skin, yet within us is that spark of divinity that we call Christ. It is our relationship. It is that part of God that we are. So spirit, the spark of divinity, is our oneness with God. Soul is the way that we are expressing it as our current level of awareness. And then our physical being is what we are working with every day. It's a great vehicle to get around in. It's a great way to be able to serve God. But we have to remember who's in charge. And what's in charge? Who's in charge? That could only be God. Now, did you notice in the story that God went looking for Adam in the cool of the day? Now, with us, our emotions, and Eve represents our lower human emotions. And we all have Adam and Eve within us. So it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you've got both female and male energy. We're talking about energy. And the male energy is the intellect. And the female energy is the emotions or the feelings. There is a higher level as expressed by Jesus and Mary, which is intuitive sensing. But right now we're talking on a human level. We're talking thinking and emotions. Think of the word emotion as energy in motion. Within us we have our masculine and feminine natures. One thinks, one feels. In the story of Adam and Eve, Eve, representing the feeling, wanted that fruit. How many times in our own lives do we try to take ever had anything to eat or drink that was not really good, healthy, that you shouldn't have had it to eat or drink? There we go. Have you maybe let your temper get away from you or whatever? These are all, you look at them, they're all emotionally generated. There may be a thought that starts it, but the real issue comes from the emotions that are generated. Most of the times, to sit down after you turn off the TV, sit down and think about the last few times you got going. You don't want your emotions to run you. That is why the punishment that Eve was given by God was that her husband would rule over her. In our own lives, we have to remember to let our intellect drive. It doesn't mean we don't have feelings. We just don't let our emotions run away with us. And the serpent that seduced Eve, that is our carnal nature. It is our lower nature. It's like how God said that the serpent had to crawl on the ground. It's like a gravitational pull that keeps us from spiritually evolving and growing. Charles Fillmore said that the remedy for this issue of temptation and turning away from the oneness we are with God is to have mastery and self-discipline, and to conserve, to take our energies and to conserve them and to put them in right directions instead of just flying off in every direction all the time. I kind of like to think about the story about the sorcerer's apprentice. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the sorcerer's got to go out. He tells the apprentice to clean up the lab, and he'll be back in a while. And of course, the apprentice gets this brilliant idea, and he puts a spell on the broom, and the broom starts going crazy all over. And he gets a hatchet, and he tries to cut the broom so it'll stop. What it does, it makes more than one broom. Now there's more craziness, and there's water slopping all over, and everything is nuts. Well, what happened is when the wizard came, the sorcerer came back, he said that only the spirits of high power should only be called on by the master. So what do we want to reach? What did Charles Fillmore tell us that we wanted to get to? Mastery. And we achieve mastery through self-control, through aligning ourselves, turning to the east, to spirit, to God, the one presence and one power in the universe and in our lives, God, the good, omnipotent. And we are one with that one. So when we focus on God, we don't have to worry about getting the bumps in our road, because we're not going to be looking away to our carnal nature for the supposed fulfillment, which really doesn't come that way. So now can you see how the story of Adam and Eve and their fall, which is, by the way, called original sin by the traditional church. Why? Because it was the original mistake. It was the first mistake of thinking that we are better than, smarter than, or separate from God. One last thing, we remember that after Adam and Eve were banished from paradise, that God sent a cherubim, a high-ranking angel with a flaming sword to guard the tree of life. Got to really pay attention here. They were not told they could not eat from the tree of life. They were only told the one tree they weren't supposed to eat. Why? Because as long as they were in the garden, they had eternal life. Why did they die? Why do we die? Because they ate the fruit. They touched the fruit. They saw themselves as less than. So we can work our way back by achieving spiritual mastery. Remember, Jesus promised life eternal. Let's live in alignment with that spiritual principle that will help us to earn back our place in the kingdom. I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. I look forward to seeing you next week, and until then, know that the light of God God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is.